Hello, hello, hello. How are you? My name's Daniel, and we are going to be working on the American presidency together. And today is everybody's favorite day, Syllabus Day. So by now you've had a chance to take a look at what we're doing in this class, and I'll try to use this video to give a little more depth about the way that we're going to be working through this course and the timeline that we are, and some of the kind of key components to it. But before that, let me take a couple minutes to introduce us to each other, and we're going to do this a little bit more as the next week especially goes on. But the first thing to say is, yes, as you saw, and as you already know, my name is Daniel Kirsch, and I'm going to try to break a habit with this course, which I kind of fell into probably about 10 years ago, which is I had begun when I was teaching at UMass the first time. I had people call me Daniel rather than anything else. Before I kind of was done with graduate school, I couldn't be called doctor yet or professor, so I didn't want to be called Mr. Kirsch. So now. So I was called Daniel, but then I really got into people calling me professor sort of as a novelty, and then especially when I finished and I could be called Dr. Kirsch, I kind of just let people do it. And now it's just become kind of a default, and it's a little bit lazy, and it does reinforce, hierarchies and everything and in the classroom. And I think there's plenty of that already without me helping it along. And so I spoke with another professor in the department, Timothy Pachurat, recently, and he aggressively tells people, do not call me that. I don't know who that is. It's Professor Pachurat. So I want to take a page from that book, and so please call me Daniel. And in your writing and in your normal everyday speech, don't call me Professor Kirsch. Don't call me Dr. Kirsch. Call me Daniel. So, and that's more of a request. Call me whatever you like, but that's my preference. I would like to call you by whatever name you like as well. We are going to be working together on this, and I want to make sure that you are comfortable, and I want to be pronouncing your name correctly. Since this is a relatively small class, I don't think we have to worry about that. About me memorizing things. I think it'll happen pretty naturally after the first week. And we only have 6 weeks. So after the first week, we got to kind of make it count to get to know each other. And I want to treat this class as more of a small group, and me as your kind of tutor. But of course, I am going to be giving these lectures. So that's going to be a big part of how you, I hope, advance your understanding. It's how I'm going to be sharing my knowledge with you. And it's going to be my knowledge about presidents. Okay? Presidents. Presidents can be exciting, can be not exciting. I've basically had an acquaintance with the subject of the presidency my entire life. And I won't bore you with the details of that. I'll just say that I can kind of recite them backwards and forwards, for instance. But besides that, obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. There's the dimensions of, military and economic and political dimensions of the presidency in the modern era. The difference between the presidency in the modern era and the difference between that and kind of the more, Civil War era all the way back to kind of the post-revolutionary period and when it was formed. And then just, all of the kind of historical groupings and periodization that happens in American political history. But in addition to that, there's kind of our modern, more social sciencey way of looking at the behavior of presidents and the kind of organizational structure that the presidency both undergirds and is supported by. So the presidency in and of itself is to study a particular focal point of the American political system that in and of itself is interesting, but is more interesting when you look at it in combination with the way it interacts with the other very important institutional structures that we have in American government. As far as by the reason I wrote people up here is, I could recite everything that's in the syllabus, and you can read that on your own, and maybe I'll read from the syllabus, but I won't read the entire thing while we're here today. But the presidency is about the people that are affected by it, primarily. I want to shift your thinking in this course, and I don't mean you personally, but I mean everyone, I think, approaches the presidency first as about personality. And I think part of our job in academia, in higher education, in social science, and political science particularly, is to begin to think about the presidency as an institution, and the presidency as a factor that affects in real ways people's lives. And I think that you will be assisted in this by not only me, but also the textbook authors are very good at this. And I'm going to talk about some of those books as we go forward in probably just a minute. But the people that are affected by it have just as much diversity and just as much kind of political importance as the presidents themselves do in some ways. And I would like us. We can certainly go into presidential politics and the politics of replacing the president and the politics of presidential elections. All of that will be talked about. And of course, I'll probably shift into a mode of kind of quarterbacking and, all this of saying who is going to go what, when, where. It's hard not to do that, especially in casual conversation. But I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that the presidency is more of an institution of political importance to real people, and what they do and the decisions they make can not only affect people's lives, but in many ways determine people's lives in a very, very real way, especially with the economic and military power that is vested within the power of the presidency as we have allowed it to evolve. And it certainly is much more powerful than it was when the American Constitution came into effect. But we'll talk more about that very soon in other lectures. So let's talk about the books. As far as the books are concerned, interlude, UMass. Let me just say that I'm very excited to be back here at UMass, even virtually. I'm currently geographically within the greater Sacramento region in California. And for those of you who are not as familiar with California, I certainly wasn't. Sacramento is the capital of the state of California, though it's by far not the biggest city. It is within the top 10 biggest cities in California, and it's the largest state, so it's not small. Anyway, so Sacramento State is where I currently teach and have been here for about 5 years now. But before that, I was a graduate student, and I was teaching undergraduates for a long time at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And so I got my PhD. I was done with in 2014. And you can look up my dissertation. It's there. It's nothing related to the presidency really in my dissertation, except that I did analyze a few people who ended up running for president later. But that's neither here nor there. My time at UMass was wonderful, and I really appreciated the faculty there. And I'm happy to be working alongside them now. And I'm happy to be, working with the students who are great at UMass as well. I spent time in Boston, and I am from upstate New York actually, so I'm kind of a geographic neighbor, but and so lifelong East Coaster really before I moved here to California about 5 years ago. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and really I'm so excited this opportunity came up again to teach this American Presidency course at UMass. I taught it twice in 2008 at UMass, once in person and once online. And online is kind of before I realized that you could teach through video. So wasn't a very good course, I don't think. This one's much better. I have a lot more experience doing this, and there's been a few more presidents that have taken place since then. But what was fun about teaching it in the spring of 2008 was that it was right in the middle of the Democratic primaries and Republican primaries too, but they seem to be less exciting somehow. The McCain-Romney Huckabee race was not quite as earth-shaking as people wanted it to be, and but the Obama-Clinton race had a lot of drama, and the Obama and Clinton race really lasted the entire time, which was at that time was really unprecedented, and it was maybe a precursor to the 2016 Democratic primary race between Clinton and Bernie Sanders. So in 2008, it was that kind of environment. If you remember, even back to 2016, it was sort of like that, and people were excited to talk about presidential elections and what the next president might do and what kind of a political moment we were in. We weren't quite in the financial crisis yet, but it was building, and so that kind of environment is what I think we should all be a little bit cognizant of here too. Is that we've been very much on in this kind of post-financial crisis, hopeful environment, this kind of edge environment, and now we're in this pandemic, and so things are different now, of course, than they have been before. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. So we'll kind of talk about that dynamic as well. And to be back at UMass without being at UMass is too bad. But the last time I was there, I think was maybe a little before I moved out here, and I was really impressed with all of the building that's going on. But even though I don't have a university office, I still want you to understand that I have office hours, and we'll talk more about this as I kind of move through the syllabus. But the key thing that you should know is right at the top of your syllabus, you have all the ways you need to get in touch with me. So you have my email. Okay, so I'm going to be checking my email pretty much every day while we're involved in this course. You have my phone number there. That is a Sacramento area phone number, and my Zoom office. So I have a personal meeting room, and don't be thrown off. I'm just using my Sac State Zoom account, which is kind of one of those little premium Zoom accounts, to go ahead and make that my Zoom office kind of permanent link. And I set up that I have office hours by appointment, but if you go to this link that I have to set up an appointment with me, you're gonna see that I'm basically available from 1 to 3 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Okay, and that's my primary kind of meeting time. If those times don't work for you, if Tuesday and Thursday from 1 to 3 are not times that you can be available, then you need to email me and we can set something else up, possibly over the phone, but possibly a Zoom thing as well. And here's another thing. We're not going to be having Zoom classes, and I'm not going to be recording any of our Zoom conversations. It's just a way to have kind of an easy kind of permanent link to a video call. But I would appreciate very much if you would, I'm going to be turning my video on while we're talking. And so I'd appreciate it if you would do the same thing, because since we're not in person, and I'm sure you've experienced this in your classes during the pandemic, it creates this kind of odd incentive for you to do other things and multitask. And if we're going to have a one-on-one Zoom conversation, we need to not be distracted. And if I'm doing something and what I'm primarily going to be focusing on is your work, so I'm not going to be, I feel like if I had to, if it's an emergency, I might have to, and if an extenuating circumstance, I might have to turn my camera off, but 99 times out of 100, I'm not going to do that. And so I would hope that you would bring that same ethic. And so if you're going to be talking to me, I'd appreciate it if we could have that two-way street of conversation so that I would know where you're coming from and you are able to hear. I'm able to see that you're hearing what I'm saying, and what I'm going to be saying is going to make hopefully a quite a bit of difference in terms of the way you're doing your work. So we'll see about that. So those appointments are Tuesday and Thursday from 1 to 3 during December and January, and we'll talk on Zoom. And the reason you're going to want to do that is because of the way that the course is structured. But before I talk about how the course is structured, let me talk about some of this content. So the textbooks. So I did put in, it was a little late, admittedly, but I did put in a bookstore order. So if you wanted to pick up a paperback of any of these 3 books, I'm not sure if they're in yet, and I have no way of really checking except calling the bookstore, which you could also do. But all 3 of these books are available online. The first 2 that I'll talk about are the kind of the more, they're not really the central textbooks in this course, but they are required nonetheless, and they are important, and I'll be covering them in the second module especially. The first one is Margaret Kimberly's Presidential, Black America and the Presidents, and it's a recent book by journalist Margaret Kimberly. And it's entertaining, it's valuable, it's entertaining, and it covers every president. And it's actually not that long. You could probably read it in a couple of hours. If you wanted to read it over an audiobook on Amazon through Audible, they have a 6-hour version of that book that you could just sit there and listen to. Or you could buy both and just read, and they're both about $10 a piece, so you might want to buy both. It's up to you. But Margaret Kimberly is is kind of an left-leaning journalist, and she is someone who has chosen to highlight the less than stellar, to be charitable, less than stellar record that American presidents have towards Black Americans. So I've chosen to include that because I think it's an important perspective that isn't covered as well in mainstream political science and even history. And as diligent as we can be about seeing how the presidency can affect different populations, I thought that this one was particularly appropriate for our kind of historical moment, but also it's a fresh perspective that I think is very, it kind of demonstrates a real need in political science. Having said that, I will say that the book has some negatives. The book is, for one thing, very negative, but that's fine. I do think that there are some assertions that are made that are pure opinion, and she does show evidence for many things, but to me, the kind of assertions she makes and the judgments that she makes about many of the facts that take place that are compelling don't really add up, and it might just be because she's stretching to include every single president and have this kind of really dark legacy of terrible things that presidents have done and neglected to do for citizens of color, and before that, people who were enslaved before the Civil War. And so it's understandable that you wouldn't be able to have the same kind of impact with every single president, because every single president didn't have the same impact. But still, it does seem a little bit like it's trying too hard sometimes. But what do I know? I'm not a person of color, and so I fully appreciate that perspective. But still, I just want more, I think, and I look forward to how this book can inspire probably people in the field of political science particularly, and maybe even history, to write a book that's in the same kind of spirit. The other book is also by an historian turned comic book writer and comic book artist. Paul Buell, who I've had the pleasure of meeting, he's a retired historian. Was at Brown University, but first at Madison. Anyway, so he wrote this book, as he's written many books that are just kind of fun historical overviews. But the reason I like this one so much is the amount of detail about the New Deal, and I really would encourage you to get the paperback version if you can somehow swing that. You might be able to find this in the Raven bookstore in Northampton, if that's still around, and there's a few other bookstores that might carry it, but if you want to just try to get it in the mail, you can probably get it before next week. It's a good book. It has a lot of really good art by Sabrina Jones, and it's art on every page, and it's kind of a comic book about Franklin D. Roosevelt and the New Deal. And the reason I've chosen to include it as a textbook in this course, which may seem a little strange to you, is that for one thing, I like comic books. I don't hide that, but also I think it's a good opportunity to kind of see things from a different perspective. But also, the New Deal itself completely transformed not only the American presidency, but American government and society. And I think there's an increasing consensus that the New Deal is really at least a second founding, maybe a third founding, but it's the modern founding of what we understand today as the political system in which the presidency is the centerpiece. So all of the different initiatives and all of the different the politics of them and the social impact of all of them and the economic impact of all of them are really examined very well in this book. So you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on through the Kindle, as well as the Margaret Kimberly book. Both of them you can get through Amazon's Kindle. But again, you can get the paper versions, and they may or may not be there in a week. But the last one is the textbook by Laurie Cox Hahn and Diane Heath, Presidents in the American Presidency, 2nd edition. And yes, you can only get the 2nd edition. Please do not buy the 1st edition. I'm not even sure what's in there. But I actually was able to call or email Laurie Cox Hahn, and she came to my class when I taught it a few years ago in Sacramento, because she's in the LA area at Chapman University. But she did her thesis on George W. Bush's press secretary operation and kind of communications office, and she recently kind of released a book about Pat Buchanan and how he was a central player actually in presidential politics for a long time. But her real strength, and hers and Diane Heath's together, their real strength is that they have done a sweeping overview of the scholarship about the presidency and how to participate in further scholarship. There's a whole chapter on presidential libraries and kind of the history of scholarship. But in addition to that, they've broken it up really well into just some very intuitive chapters that should look very second nature to students, undergraduate students particularly, of American politics, because in all of your introductory American government courses, or in your AP courses if you took the AP course instead, it divides it into things like the president and Congress, the president and the Supreme Court, the president and the executive branch, the president and the mass media. So all these different areas in which the presidency is involved, and they do a pretty good job, a really good job of just involving through a lot of examples and making a lot of good points, and posing some really interesting questions and possible avenues for further research. So that book is not available as an ebook over Amazon. However, there's this great new tool that many of you probably, I know Professor Schaefer in this department is particularly fond of using. It's called Perusall or Parasol. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I think it comes from Perusall. I've set up an account for this course, and Perusall actually allows you to kind of make ebooks out of things that aren't ebooks, and this one has already been used in a Perusall course. So, and there is a feature that I'm not really going to be using in this one. I'm just making it an ebook function. But if you wanted, you can make comments, and I could kind of keep track of what you're reading. And so I might do that casually. So please read it, and I'll take a look at some of the metrics of what people are actually reading in the textbook. But I think you'll really need it to be able to engage in some of the work in this class. So anyway, so Perusall, and I'll answer any questions that you have about that. But I think that should be pretty straightforward once you see the Blackboard link come live, which it should tomorrow. I'm just constructing the course shell today, but this course is not that complex or complicated. It's really just going to be a couple of very simple features. And I think you'll see that even though it might be different to you in some of your kind of traditional ways of doing school, I think you'll see that it's relatively straightforward. So let's kind of get into what that means. Okay. I use a system in my teaching, particularly for teaching upper division courses beyond the introductory level, but I'm moving towards doing it in the introductory level as well, called contract grading. If you've never encountered it before, if you have, then welcome back. But most people have not encountered it before, so let me explain what it is. Contract grading is a system by which student work is only really evaluated for the ability to have completed the assignment to the satisfaction of the instructor. And if you can do that for all of the work in the course, you get a B. Everybody gets a B for doing that work, okay? If you complete every assignment, you get a B. To get an A, you do all the work required for a B, but then you also do 3 conferences about your work and how to improve it, and maybe if some of you, and so you do conferences with the professor, you do conferences with the instructor, and the way that's facilitated is through my office hours. Okay, so that's really the linkage, that's the incentive for you to be at my office hours. If I don't see you at my office hours, it means you don't care about getting an A, you care about getting a B, which is great too. But if you want to get the A, then you should set up appointments with me. That's why there's plenty of appointment spaces for that. And they should only take about 20 minutes at most. Most of the time, but I think 20 minutes is a nice round number. It might go a little bit longer, it might be a lot shorter. But it's just an opportunity for me to kind of look at one of the assignments you've done and say, this was good, you could improve it here, here, and here. And the reason that might be necessary for the A, I'll talk about that first, is that you then have to write a 1-page reflection on how you felt about the comments that I made and the conversation that we had. Okay, so just a 1-page write-up. You can make it 2 pages if you want, but nothing more than that. You know, you have about a week after our conference to do that. Let me say this one more time, because it bears repeating, because I got the same question a lot last semester when I was kind of doing this contract grading system particularly. You don't need to do conferences, one-on-one meetings with me during my office hours. You don't need to. It's not required. But it is required if you want an A. If you want the A, you have to meet with me and virtually, and if the time doesn't work, we can set up a different time. And we have to have a video call. You have to, and you have to bring questions, and I have to bring questions, and we have to talk about a paper for 20 minutes. And the paper can be a paper that I marked as complete. It can be, and we can just talk about how you can improve your writing, and how you miss something about the presidency. Or it might be an incomplete paper, and the incomplete paper can be something you did, and it needed work, and I couldn't mark it as complete. And that does happen, and it really can happen if the maybe if the assignment seems too hard for you. Anyway, so for altogether several reasons, there may be many reasons, but the point is that you should start looking at your calendar now, and looking to schedule when you can do your 3 conferences. And by the way, they're kind of scheduled in such a way as that your first conference has to be in the first 2 weeks, your second conference has to be in the second 2 weeks, and your third conference has to be in the third 2 weeks. If you miss the window, I'm sorry, you can't get the A. You can get maybe an A-. Okay, and after the 4th week, you won't be able to get an A-. You can only get a B+. So so I cannot make exceptions. I've only allotted so many times. So you need to schedule something in the first 2 weeks of class for me to be able to count that as a conference that you can have 3 of. Okay. So that's the conferences. The other, so that goes for complete and incomplete work. You just have to bring one of your papers with you. And it doesn't have to be, so let me talk about your papers. There's only 2 kinds of papers. The reflections, the conferences and the reflections I've already talked about. But there's only 2 there's with every module that we have, and there are 6 of them, and every module is about a week. All 5 modules are a week, by the way, and then the 4th module, the 6th module, is only 4 days, but I'll accept work after the end of classes because I have to turn in grades on January 31st, but the last day of class is January 24th. So there's no final exam in this course, so maybe you can breathe a sigh of relief about that. But there will be 6 individual pieces of writing. Those are called literature reviews. Let me talk about those first. So the literature reviews, you've probably used and heard this term before. But literature reviews, in this case, is kind of a literature review of a literature review. I'm going to be asking you a series of questions, or anyway, I'm going to be posing to you that there are possible questions that can be answered with the textbook reading that you're assigned for that week. In addition to that, and you're going to need to quote the textbook for that week. In Module 2, it's all 3 textbooks. But you'll be quoting the textbook chapter that's assigned that week. In addition to that, you need to also be, and I'm going to be clarifying this as the assignments come live, so it's written down as well, but you need to bring two additional literature review pieces and put them in to your assignment. So you need to be quoting not only from the textbook, but also from 2 journal articles that you find. And I'm going to be restricting your journal articles to a journal called Presidential Studies Quarterly. And so the 2 journal articles that you find should say Presidential Studies Quarterly in the last 20 years has actually talked about this particular question. And this is what authors have had to say about it, and this is what researchers have found about it. So in that literature review is what you'll need to quote from that. And the point of a literature review is to be able to say, this is what has been written before about a question, whether it's how presidential rhetoric about welfare and healthcare has affected actual policy making, has affected actual people, or whether presidential decision making at the military level actually makes a difference to the military, and whether the president is actually a leader of the military. And maybe all of this centers around, how much of an impact the president has, and maybe what impact do advisors like the Secretary of the Treasury and the Federal Reserve Chair, and he's more than an advisor certainly, but other institutional players that are in kind of advisory or subordinate roles to the president, what they can do in terms of influencing a president's decision. So literature reviews are ways of showing that, the way that these questions have been tackled in the past is right here. And here's some recent articles, and we can certainly talk more about how literature reviews work, but I'll try to refine that in one of the questions that's asked. So that's the literature review angle. The last thing is the discussions. So the discussions are going to be, I'm going to let you kind of take a look at the discussions tab on the Blackboard page, but I will have an introductory post. And here's what the discussions tab is. For every module, and there are 6 modules, okay, and they're broken up into, let me show you what they are. 6 modules are, the first one is the presidency and the branches of government. That's the first module, the second one, and the modules all last a week. The second module is the presidency and structures and functions of the federal government. And that's where we're going to be talking more about FDR and the New Deal for beginners and presidential. Module 3 is media, elections, and the public face of the presidency to the people. Module 4 is new research about the presidency in the field of political science. So the first 3 modules is pretty straightforward. There are 2 assignments. And if you do the literature review and the discussion board, that's all the assignments you need to do. That, and you should probably make an appointment for my office hours. I would wait till the second week to do an appointment for your office hours. You could do the first week if you want, but you won't really have a piece of writing to look at until the second week. Okay, so the literature review I've talked about. The discussion board is meant to be a semester-long conversation between you, all of you, and me, and each other. So the way that I'm choosing to do that is a very simple way, which is I'm encouraging you to write a video post or an audio post, and not write it, but just speak it. So trying to answer maybe either my question or respond to someone else's. And I'll just say that you should probably do 2 posts. You should do one initially after you finish the reading, and listen to my lectures, and then another post, a shorter one, responding to what someone else says. Okay, and if you do both of those things, then I can mark your discussion board as complete. And both of your posts, your audio or video post, should be your first one should be about 5 minutes long. The second one can be very short, of indeterminate length, but whatever short means. And as long as I can see that you've made a good faith effort for both of them, then I'll go ahead and mark it as complete. If I see that you didn't really do it, or if by that I mean you kind of, it's evident to me that you haven't done the reading or watched the lectures, then I'm going to have you do it again. Or I'm going to at least mark it as incomplete. And you can have up to 2 missing or incomplete assignments out of the 12. Okay, but if you have more than 2, then missing or incomplete, same thing. If you have more than 2 incompletes, then you may not get a B. You'll probably get a B minus. If you get much lower, there's a chart in the syllabus that tells you, how many you can miss, how many you can not do, or get an incomplete on, and get a C, and then get a D, and get an F. and I only allow for one late assignment, and it's kind of crunch time the whole time we're in this class, so punctuality is very important, maybe more so than it usually is. So please try to get these assignments in every Thursday night is when I'm really looking for them. And then the last one, you need to get it in by January 24th, but I will also accept it up to a week after it was assigned, meaning that Friday, that Thursday and Friday, January 31st. But 31st is when I turn the grades in, and the grades are real. The grades are A, B, C, and D, and F. But it's based on this idea that if you do all the work, you get a B, and if you do a little bit of extra work, you can get an A. Okay, that's the basic philosophy behind contract grading. And the reason I do it is the same reason I'm asking you to call me Daniel, because I think we can all do a little bit more, especially in this period of automation and this period of increasing technology and online environment that we find ourselves in and working with, that injecting a little humanity where we can is, I think, the right thing to do. And I've worked for years in higher education and done all kinds of different grading systems and worked with rubrics and made my own rubrics and used other people's and evaluated student work. But I always, but to me, there's very little room for objectivity in all of this. And I think in this kind of era of grade inflation that we have, I think it's about time we started to really rethink whether grading really helps us. And so you still need to have grades, and that's kind of where this comes from. And of course, there's all these little small incentives about doing the work that is mixed in, of course, that's still grading based. But nothing's perfect, and baby steps. But I think contract grading is a good start toward just making sure that people are getting out of these things what they need to, and maybe what they put in. So I think putting a little bit more power in your hands is something that I appreciate about this grading system, because you can kind of control most of your own fate. But of course, it has to be acceptable to the instructor, the work that you do. But it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be, there's no kind of small gradations of A to B and A to C and that kind of thing. It's just complete or incomplete is basically it. And whether you've improved or not, or reflected or not on the conversations that we've had. Okay, I think that's about all for now with the syllabus. And you probably have questions, and I'm happy to answer them, and maybe we can have an ongoing discussion board about syllabus questions. But please take a look around this course at the rest of the lectures that I'm going to be posting for you today, and please take a look at the inaugural discussion board chapter, and discussion board opportunity for this module, as well as the first literature review. And whatever questions you have, please feel free to email me, and we can also set up a time. You can use the Calendly link to make your own appointment, and we can talk to each other, synchronously. But I'm happy to engage in whatever conversation you need to with the rest of the class or privately over my email. Okay, I really am looking forward to this with all of you. I hope that you will take this opportunity now to take a look at the syllabus. Oh, one more thing about the discussion board. It is optional to do an audio or video clip or write, but I'm using the rule of thumb that if it takes 5 minutes to say, 125 words a minute is what someone speaks. So it can either be a 5-minute post, or you can write a 625 word essay in your discussion post. So either one is fine with me, and I think roughly the same materially, but I think it's going to be easier for most people to record something. So I hope you end up doing that, and we can get to know each other a little bit that way. And the first one will be not only about the literature review, but it'll be about getting to know you and whatever questions you have about the course in the first discussion board post conversation. All right, everyone. That's all from me for now, but look forward to seeing you on the discussion board and over email and everything else, and in my office hours. And otherwise, look for my executive branch, judicial branch, and Congress branch, legislative branch lectures as well. All right. Talk to you soon.